Good morning. Welcome to Ripon Community Church. My name is Sam. I'm one of the pastors here. It is so good to be here with all of you here on Sunday morning. We are in this new series, and as I was thinking about this new series, I actually sent a video out this week, kind of talked about this. I've noticed a few different statistics out there, and I won't go into all the details, but essentially what the statistics say are that we are in a group of people in society, in the history of the world, where we are the most depressed and anxious people in history. Aren't you glad you came to church this morning? And in addition to that, not only are we the most depressed and anxious group of people in the history of the world, we're also, and this one surprised me a little bit, we're the loneliest. Like we are experiencing loneliness in a way that we've never experienced it before. They would call it a loneliness epidemic. Aren't you really glad you came to church this morning? But what's crazy about that one is like we are more connected digitally than we have ever been in the history of the world. Like we are so incredibly connected, and yet we feel this loneliness. There's something happening. Something that we probably don't understand completely yet, but it's happening, and I bet you feel it. Like when I say that, you might think like that's kind of strange and weird when I think about it intellectually, but I can feel it. And it doesn't surprise me. Like I see it. This is why we're kicking off a brand new series, a series that we are calling Together. Together, being with one another. The premise is this. All of us, like in our bones, in our gut, we want to be together. We want to be connected to each other, but these genuine and these honest and these healthy relationships have maybe never been harder to come by or more difficult to sustain. So, what do you do about that? Like, what do you do about that reality? How do we develop these things that we need and that we want desperately? Throughout this series, we're going to look at that. We're going to look to God for his kind of wisdom and address a whole host of different relationships that we typically have. One of them being family relationships. How excited are you about that one? You guys are so nervous. It's okay to laugh about these sort of things, especially family, right? Like that's one of the, when we talk about things and when I have counseling relationships with people, like talking to people about issues that they're dealing with, family relationships is a hard one. Like that's the one we feel the closest to us and we struggle with maybe the most. And so I'm really excited to talk about that one. That one's gonna be great. I'm gonna talk about romantic relationships. We're gonna talk about church relationships, all that kind of stuff. It's gonna be great. This week though, to kick things off, we're starting with friendship. Friendship. Like playground level friendship. Like lunch table gangs. Like having a bestie. Like having a squad. Or dudes that play cards together. Or grab a drink with one another. Friends. Friends. We still need them. Maybe now more than ever. And as we look at this, we'll see their value according to God. We'll look at what factors create the deepest kinds of friendships, and we'll see how to have God's kind of friendships, friendships that are based on trust, loyalty, and Jesus-like character. Now, as you look through the Bible, there's a whole lot of different examples of friendship, but maybe the most stunning one is this relationship that David has, King David. And as we enter into this story, this history of his life, there's this moment that is really just tense when you read it. David, he finds himself out in the middle of a field. There's this rock outcropping, this pile of rocks, and he's literally hiding behind it. Now, he's hiding behind it because he's afraid for his life. Just days earlier, the king of the country, King Saul, had thrown a spear at him and tried to kill him multiple times, actually, but most recently, that was what happened. And so he's afraid for his life, and he's hiding out. He's supposed to be at dinner. There's this big, fancy banquet dinner thing happening, and everybody's there, and every year, David would go and sit in a particular spot, and he would sit close to King Saul, and it would be great, but he's not there because he's afraid if he goes, he's going to die. So he's not there, and what he had told one of his friends was, that if I don't go there, you watch how Saul reacts and see what happens. So there he is, right? He's out in the middle of this field, hiding behind these rocks. He's afraid for his life. And if you were just an innocent bystander, not knowing any of this, just knowing that David is hiding and you watch what happens next, you would be really worried about what was going to happen. Because Jonathan, one of David's friends, walks out. Jonathan happens to be Saul's son and the next in line to be king if Saul were to die. And David is the one that would most likely become king if something weird happened. So Jonathan comes out with a bow in hand and some arrows, and he strings up the bow, and he's got another guy with him, and he gets it out. And you'd think, like, if you were a bystander, like, is he going to kill him? Is he shooting for David? Does he know that he's out there and he's just going to try and hit him with an arrow? And he pulls the string and he launches it up in the air. And then he grabs another one and he pulls the string and he launches another arrow deep out into the field. Jonathan sends the young lad that's with him out into the field to go and get the arrows. And he yells as he goes further out, "Go further, go farther. The arrows are farther out there." And when David hears those words, his heart sinks, his eyes get red, they well up with tears. Because this was the sign that Jonathan and him had agreed on just a little while ago. Jonathan and him had met, and David had said, "Your dad's trying to kill me." And Jonathan's like, no, he can't be. Well, you just wait. You go to this banquet. I won't be there. And if he gets crazy and gets angry, you'll know. And that's exactly what had happened. And so Jonathan walked out with that bow and arrow, having agreed that if he says those words to that young lad, David would know that his life was in danger. He walks out there knowing that he has to choose his friend David or his father and his own legacy. Because if David stays around, they both know he's going to become king one day instead of Jonathan. So there he is. He shoots those arrows. He says those words. And this is a moment between two of the best friends in the history of the Bible. They were so close. This is what happens next and what it says next. It says, as soon as the boy was gone, David came out from where he had been hiding near the stone pile. Then David bowed 3 times to Jonathan with his face to the ground. Both of them were in tears as they embraced each other and said goodbye, especially David. At last, Jonathan said to David, "Go in peace, for we have sworn loyalty to each other in the Lord's name. The Lord is the witness of a bond between us and our children forever." Then David left, and Jonathan returned to the town. This is a picture of something remarkable, isn't it? 2 young men bound by love and loyalty to each other, friendship with each other. They're both willing in this moment to risk their lives and trust one another. Don't you want something like that in your life? Don't you want that? Someone you can count on like that. An unbreakable bond. That's the question today. How do you go about getting that? Something as valuable as that does not come cheap. Genuine friendship doesn't happen naturally. We may hope for it, but it's not something that just sparks and happens. And even with that, even when you work for it, it's not guaranteed. Friendship like that is a gift. It's also a gift that grows more valuable as you care for it and honor it. And there are at least 3 things that make it more likely to grow. The first is this: it's cost. Cost. You have to be ready for it to cost you something if you want friendship like that. Second thing is mission. It requires a mission, something worth struggling for together. It's one of the principal ways to help that sort of thing grow in your life. And the third thing is trust. It requires trust, something that is grown over time. Let's start with the first one. Friendships are more meaningful when they cost you something. With David and Jonathan, it would cost them a number of things, but that's the standard. It's not just them. It's all throughout the Bible. There's more stories like this. When Paul, who taught about the New Testament, started new churches, was one of the apostles, he's traveling all around teaching about Jesus. He often traveled with companions and people who would travel along with him. Paul, being Paul's companion was a front row seat to these amazing, incredible events where he would go into a town and give these speeches and people would believe in Jesus. He'd do miraculous things. So it was a coveted thing. Like, you'd want to be with Paul when he's doing these wild things. But sometimes being his companion or his friend costs you something. There's a passing verse at the end of Colossians that perfectly illustrates this. Paul writes this. He says, Aristarchus, who is in prison with me, sends you his greetings. And so does Mark, Barnabas' son. As you were instructed before, make Mark welcome if he comes your way. Aristarchus, who is in prison with me, right? Do you think that's what he expected to happen when he started following Paul and going along with Paul? Like, I'm going to go with Paul, Mom. I'm so excited. Like, he's telling his parents that we're going to go and we're going to change the world. We're going to tell people about Jesus. You go, son. And then like a little while later, he's like, oh, I'm in prison. Yay. I'm writing to Mom. Followed Paul. Found myself in prison. Great friend. Right? That's the thing that happens. Do you think he expected that to happen when he set off with Paul? Probably not. It's like the whole guilty by association thing. Like, you're traveling around with him. He's going to go to prison, so you're with him. So you go too. I'm going to send you there too. Paul had just this way of landing himself there. It's kind of a common theme for him. But here's the thing. Prison likely did the opposite of what you'd expect. It was likely one of the things that strengthened their relationship. Why? Because the best friendships cost you something. There's a price. For me, I think of the times that we've moved from one house to another and people have shown up and friends have shown up to help. And it's amazing. Like, they actually showed up, right? That's how you feel when that happens. I think of a friend who he tacked on like a 2-hour extra drive time for like being here on a Sunday morning and hanging out and chatting with me for 15 minutes because he was traveling up here, but he tacked on that just to like see you. Like that's a special thing. I think of the ones who go on late night runs or who are up for late night questions because you're struggling. Friendship should be given freely. Maybe you think of the person that showed up when no one else would. Or maybe the person who checked on you when life was happening and you went radio silent and you weren't really talking to people, but they reached out and said, hey, how are you doing? Or you might even think of the people that you can tell anything to and you can trust that they'll keep it to themselves. Friendship should be given freely, but it costs us something. And there are people in our lives who we know are happy to front that bill. You can likely recall times when people have done that for you. But here's the question. The best way to grow friendships is not to wonder about or quiz yourself on how much others have done for you. It's not to rate people on the friendship scale and see if you can qualify them as a friend or decide how many quality ones you have. That's not the way to grow friendship. The best way to grow friendship is quite the opposite, actually. It's to ask yourself, how much have I shown myself willing to sacrifice and experience the cost of friendship for others? How often have I shown up at the late night call? And it's not that you have to go searching for ways to prove your friendship. Don't go proving your friendship. If you live long enough, you'll find opportunities. The opportunities will present themselves. When they come, choose to show up and honor others when they do for you too. That's how you'll find yourself surrounded by friends willing to have your friendship cost you something. That's the first one, right? Friendship's going to have a cost. Second one is friendships become stronger when they work toward a common goal together. There's a mission to it. Something happened this last week. Maybe if you were living under a rock, maybe you missed it, but pretty much everybody else saw this. How many of you saw Monday Night Football this last week? Yes, a lot of you. Okay. Last week, DeMar Hamlin, player for the Buffalo Bills, collapsed on the field. He had just made a tackle, got up, and apparently went into cardiac arrest and fell back down. And there's all kinds of stories about it everywhere, about the amazing way that they saved the guy and how quickly the responders showed up and everything like that. And I think as of this morning, it said, the last I read was that he's speaking and recovering, and that's remarkable. As a family, we tend to watch like the Packer games and that's it. But for some reason, we had Monday Night Football on this last week, and you saw the reaction. It was amazing. There's a picture here of that, and like even seeing it, like it grabs you, doesn't it? Grown men holding each other, praying and encouraging each other and holding on to hope for their friend from both teams. It's remarkable. It's amazing. It was to the point where they didn't finish the game. I've never seen an NFL game not finish. It's crazy. It's something about sports that connects people together in a way that few other things do. An entire team completely devoted and committed to achieving one singular purpose. The side effect of that, the side effects are these deep friendships. These relationships that have endured struggle together. These moments of getting to the end of yourself and then having your teammate pick you up and keep you moving and say, we can do this together. Keep you going. It's the team that stops everything because you fell, and they're not going to move forward until you're back on your feet. It's beautiful. It hits you in the gut. And we long for that. We want that in our lives. We find ourselves inspired to pray along with the team for this young man. I mean, that's amazing. We want him to be better. Here's what you need to know. You don't need to play sports to have that kind of friendship. All you need is a common goal, a shared mission, and you have to go all in on it. If you ever read the end of Paul's letters, so he's writing to different churches, encouraging them, and it can get kind of boring at the end. I'm just saying, let me be honest with you, it can get a little boring because it's often just a list of names, people we don't really know. But I tell you what, over the past year especially, for me personally, I found myself reading those names and feeling like I get it now. Like I really get it, maybe more than ever before. Like in Romans at the end when it says this, it says, I commend to you our sister Phoebe, who is a deacon in the church in Centria. Welcome her in the Lord as one who is worthy of honor among God's people. Help her in whatever she needs, for she has been helpful to many and especially to me. Give my greetings to Priscilla and Aquila, my co-workers in the ministry of Christ Jesus. In fact, they once risked their lives for me. I'm thankful to them, and so are all the Gentile churches. Also, give my greetings to the church that meets in their home. Greet my dear friend Epenetus. He was the first person from the province of Asia to become a follower of Christ. Give my greetings to Mary, who has worked so hard for your benefit. Greet Andronicus and Junia, my fellow Jews who were in prison with me. There's prison again. They are highly respected among the apostles and became followers of Christ before I did. Greet Ampliatus, my dear friend in the Lord. Greet Urbanus, our co-worker in Christ, and my dear friend Stachys. It goes on, like it keeps on going with more names, but all I can think of now is how many names I'd want to list. But honestly, if I tried, and maybe you've seen this before, I wouldn't hold it together. Like I'd be a mess up here if I started listing names and what they've done. There are just so many of you who have given so much to this church, who have worked so hard for the message of Jesus to spread in this community. You see, church isn't just about showing up for some nice music and a message that helps make some sense out of life. It's that, but it's so much more. Church is a people who are devoted to the singular purpose of the message of Jesus. We are devoted to representing Jesus well, the very best we can. It's in the singing and it's in the learning. It's even more so in the serving and the showing up to help and the being part of sharing Jesus' message. Because a life lived for him changes and transforms people and communities like nothing else can. Nothing else does it like this. And we all get to be a part of that. We all get to have that purpose that binds us together. Yeah, I look out here and I see friends. Like so many people that I have experienced going through difficulty with or trying to accomplish something with. It's this most important purpose that gives us the privilege of having these kinds of friendships. If you want to start to experience and taste that kind of friendship for yourself, maybe you're here and like, man, I do feel alone. Maybe you're here and like, I do want to be part of something bigger than myself. Here's the thing, showing up for a service is amazing. Keep doing that because it helps you grow so much. But if you want to experience that next thing, it's not just that, it's being part of it. It's serving. It's being part of accomplishing the mission together. We've got some plans later this year to do some really fun things, and we'll talk more about that in the coming weeks. Be a part of that, but don't wait till then to get involved. Be a part of it now. We had Christmas Eve service a couple weeks ago, and it always happens every year. There's a little bit of a quiet moment before the service starts. And I get to look around and see these people that have shown up and given time and effort and energy. And that is a special moment because you get to say, man, we did this together. God is using us and we are being used by God to bring this message to a whole bunch of people. It is special. And that's one pocket of 100 different ways that can happen here and you can be a part of that. So I encourage you, if you're like, hey, I want to be involved, I want to experience that, that's where it happens. That's serving alongside other people. There's a red card. If you want to do it, it's not anything formal or fancy. Just put your name on it and serving and put in the offering basket and we'll chat. And that would be awesome because that is a way to get connected here in a way that's better than maybe anything else because you're a part of something with a mission doing it. The people with the closest friendships here are the people that serve. You get to be a part of it. It's beautiful. And if you're here and you're wanting that is the easiest step I can tell you. And it's a gift. I'm not asking, like, if you don't want to do it, don't. But if you want that, do it. That's the next step to be close to people. Let's review. The good kind of friendship, the one from God, it requires a cost, a willingness to have something cost you something. It requires a mission, a shared purpose or goal. But finally, it requires a mixture of a number of things, and we'll call it all put together as trust. Trust. The further into life I get, the harder this one is to give. You guys with me on that? The further into life I get, the harder trust is to give away because you just experience some life. Each time trust gets broke, it can feel like the next time requires just a little more to give it away. But trust, I think it can be calculated by a formula. You ready for this? This is it. It's time plus consistency multiplied by adversity equals trust. Does that ring true for you guys? Have you experienced that maybe in your life? At first, I didn't have the parentheses, and I realized that this morning. I was really worried some math person would come and correct me on order of operations, but we fixed it. But time and consistency, they're added together. Like you have time and you're always there. You show up over and over again. But then adversity has this multiplying effect where if you go through a hard thing with somebody else, it ties you together. That's where trust is found. Proverbs probably says it best. It says this. It says, putting confidence in an unreliable person in times of trouble is like chewing with a broken tooth or walking on a lame foot. That has a great image. And it's really true. You know what's also true? The opposite. The opposite is also true. When you experience someone who, over time, consistently shows up in the midst of adversity and trouble, that person earns trust. When they see you at your weakest, when they experience your ugly side, when they see all of it and they show up and they don't shrink away from you, that's when you know you have a friend. But here again, the temptation here is to think to yourself, now who in my life has earned that kind of trust? And I get it, that's natural. It's actually good, like you should be wise with your friendship. But the even better step is to be brutally honest with yourself. Are you that kind of friend? Start there. Are you that kind of friend? Have you shied away from things when they got hard? Have you shown up? Have you spent the time? Have you chosen to be consistently there? Are you that kind of friend? Friendships are what you make them. It's just true. We all want them, but you can't have quality ones if you're not willing to put in the time and effort. They have a cost. They thrive when they share a mission. They require trust. And as a church, we're always talking about our mission, how we can represent Jesus well. This is maybe one of the clearest ways we can be a representative of Jesus. I mean, think of it. What did Jesus do during his time here? He gathered up a group of 12 men along with a number of women who would support his ministry. They spent day and night together for 3 whole years. They did it for the purpose of announcing that because of Jesus, God's kingdom had shown up here on earth and it was about to change everything. They celebrated the best of times together. They endured everyone abandoning them. They experienced literal storms on the water together in a boat. That was frightening. They experienced the miraculous together. To be a friend like Jesus, to represent Jesus well in our friendships is to show up, to keep showing up. And it's to be like Jesus, representing him well in the midst of those friendships. You can be surrounded by people and still feel lonely. I mean, your phone can be blowing up with notifications and chat messages and still feel like you've got no one. It's real. To experience friendship, the focus cannot be on what others are doing for you. It has to be how you can show up for other people. It starts with becoming the kind of friend and becoming the kind of person who shows up when things get hard or when things get boring or when things get tiring. It starts with being that friend. When Jonathan and David embraced before David began to run and hide from Saul, this was a moment of true friendship. This was essentially the end of their time together in person, but it had been a gift and they knew it. And they both showed up for it like they'd done hundreds of times before. When you are fortunate enough to have the gift of a good friend, represent Jesus well by being a friend. And then accepting and cherishing the gift if that gift gets given back to you. In a minute, we're going to sing a song, and it's an old hymn. It's "Come Thy Fount," which is some nice old words. But in it is this line that I always stumble over a little bit because it's not what I expected to say. It says, "Tune my heart to sing thy grace." I expected to say praise. Tune thy heart to sing thy praise, right? You'd be expecting to sing that praise. But it says grace. Why grace? And why tuning your heart? As we talk about friendship and being that kind of friend, what we're really doing is tuning our heart, helping us as people have this sort of mentality, this way of giving of ourselves that reflects what God is like. And you know what God's like? God's a giver of grace. God's someone who allows there to be forgiveness and freedom and to walk gently with people and to consistently be there, even when no one else shows up. So when we want to represent Jesus well, let's sing that God would tune our hearts to sing his grace. Would you pray with me? Dear God, thank you so much for the examples of what friendship are, the ones from your son Jesus, the one with David and Jonathan. We are grateful for those. But God, today, as we think about this and as we long to not feel lonely, help us to choose to be those kinds of people who show up, who decide to give because we know it's going to cost us something, people who are committed to a mission that's shared because it ties us together, and people who earn and grow in giving and having trust with friends. God, tune our hearts to sing your grace and have that be the way that we represent you well with our friendships. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.